Welcome to Drinks with Defenders. I'm Addie B. Plate.
And I'm Kayla Murphy. We're two law school friends turned criminal defense attorneys turned podcast hosts.
We're here in this space because we now work in separate offices and miss collaborating with each other.
We've been talking about creating a podcast for years where we talk about the complexities of the criminal justice system, the aspects of it that we grapple with, and the importance of what we do.
At the end of a long work week, we want to sit down, have a drink with each other, and talk about the rabbit holes of criminal defense, just like we always have. So let's get into it. Cheers! What the fuck is up?
Hey, dude, it's been so long.
Dude, today, I have to tell you though, I went and got breakfast this morning and there was a guy who was like working at the place we went and got breakfast who was like working, I don't know, it's kind of like a farmhouse bakery / diner. So you go up and you order and then you go get seated. And the guy who was taking our order, I kept telling Will, I was like, he is so Clark coded. Like the way he would talk and the things he was talking about, because he was just super chatty. Like he's just taking our breakfast order and we found out that he painted a mural somewhere over in the UK in like the span of this, like he was very artsy and like, I don't know, just the way he was talking. I was like, well, he reminds me so much of Clark. And he goes, really? And I was like, oh yeah, like I forgot that like you don't really know Clark. But it was so weird. I was like, whoa, like you remind me of my friend. It was so weird. It was good. It was weird.
But to be honest, you mentioned he was artistic. This guy.
Mm-hmm.
I got a haircut and now my nickname has been Corporate Clark.
Corporate Clark. I love that. Corporate Clark joining us on the Drinks with Defenders. That's amazing.
I just couldn't do the shaggy hair and it was I just had this is the shortest hair I've had in 16 years.
Ooh, fresh cut Clark. I love that.
Yeah, and keep in mind when you guys met me, it was like down to here.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. Talking about important stuff, Kayla.
No, I'm sorry. My dog is drinking water vigorously. So that's why I was like trying to refrain from contributing unwanted noise to our conversation. But good for you. I'm sure you can rock any look.
Thanks. How's everyone's holidays shaping out? You got any big plans this week?
You go first, Kayla.
Nothing crazy. We usually just go between Micah's family's house and my house. So that's what we're going to do. Good stuff. Yeah, nothing really to report. Just been watching a lot of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And this is my first my first time dipping my toe into the Real Housewives franchise. And what a universe.
I have thoughts to share with you on that. Yeah.
Oh my God. Right. You have I
have thoughts to share with you on that. So,
okay.
I'm just going to say, first of all, great use of time dipping your toes into the Housewives franchise. However, as a Salt Lake City native, as somebody who was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, you absolutely picked the wrong starter franchise of it. Because listen, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City is top tier. Every time I watch that show, I see somebody on it that I know. For the first few seasons, somebody that I know's mom was one of the housewives.
Oh my God.
It is so good. So explore all you need to with Beverly Hills, but I would highly encourage you to give Salt Lake City a watch. Also, one of the housewives on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City just came out with her second book. The first one was really good. I'm listening to the audiobook for the second one. So I feel like that's up your alley. The first one was really interesting. this housewife. The first book was really good. It was called Bad Mormon. And I feel like that's up your alley as well. The audiobook, she narrates both audiobooks of both of her books, which I appreciate when authors do that because you kind of get to hear the way they intended their writing to go. But yeah, I would highly encourage you to give Real Housewives of Salt Lake City a watch. Also, Real Housewives of Potemkin's pretty good. Yeah, I've watched like all of the series. I love trash television. It is therapy for me. I love women just being like kind of a lot. I love the fashion on all of the Real Housewives franchises. Like it feeds a part of my soul. So I'm very excited for this next chapter of yours. You're going to go on a spiritual journey with the Real Housewives. And then when they have like the reunion episodes where Andy Cohen sits down with them,
oh my God.
It's top tier entertainment. So good.
He is so messy. I love Andy Cohen.
So messy. Speaking of that, speaking of holiday plans, this coming week for Christmas, I unfortunately have to work on Christmas Eve, which is just the life of being an attorney. That's okay. Yeah, just kind of laying low. Will and I just kind of chilling. I'm really excited for the like New Year's show. Speaking of Andy Cohen, because I'm not sure, but I'm really hoping that Andy Cohen and Anderson Cooper get to be on the New Year's Eve show because last year was so messy when they were on it. And it's like two men that I just love being drunk on television. It was fantastic.
I think I saw Anderson Cooper at a bar last night.
No, listen. Okay.
And I'm honestly kicking myself for not going up to the man, even if I embarrassed him, just to say like, you look a lot like Anderson Cooper.
Anderson Cooper.
I didn't do it, but we kept making eye contact and he was pretty sure it was him.
Listen, Anderson Cooper will forever be like, Anderson Cooper is not a straight man, but he will forever be one of my crushes. Like he's just adorable. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the news clips of him giggling. It brings me joy.
Yeah.
He has the funniest laugh. I love Anderson Cooper. I would have ran up to him and just not been cool about it. So at least when you look back in hindsight, you know that you're cooler than me because I wouldn't have handled that well. I would have been like, oh my God, it's Anderson Cooper. Yeah.
Oh man.
Not cool.
Yeah.
Definitely one of America's treasures.
He was
agreed.
Also definitely with a group of gay men, and the fact that we kept making eye contact, the last thing I wanted to do with this fresh haircut is go up to him and be like, hey, has anyone ever told you that you look like Anderson Cooper, and give him the wrong idea? And then he's just like, no, never. Tell me more.
I would have like wasted opportunity. If you're going to flirt with a random man, it better be Anderson Cooper or at least his doppelganger.
It's so
like,
true.
Honestly.
Yeah. Yep.
You should have wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
What good is a new haircut if you're not flirting like aimlessly?
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Hot take.
As someone who's in a current relationship, it's doing just fine for me there.
Fair. But I'll have to circle back. I'll ask like
you have to keep the flirting alive in your relationship.
Exactly.
Right? Keep it new, keep it hot.
Yeah. With that person.
I appreciate it, Clark. I see where you're at. That's right.
I think a little harmless, like flirting with a celebrity to just like say hi is okay. But maybe that's a hot take. Like that's not going anywhere. You're just trying to say hi. And if it's like you have to like compliment them in order to like make it less weird, I think that's very different. Like if you're just like, hey, like you look like Anderson Cooper, to see if it's Anderson Cooper, I think that's fine.
You know what, Addie, you live your life. You do your thing.
I'm not saying like hit on them. I'm just saying if you have to be complimentary of somebody because you think it's a celebrity, that's not the same.
Real quick.
I don't know.
Top favorite thing you ate when you were in England? Go.
Oh.
By the way, she was in England recently, right? For like 10 days?
I was. It was amazing. Honestly, that's really hard because something that's really underrated about the UK is some of their other cuisines that they have there. So we went to Dishoom, which is a kind of a crazed Indian like restaurant I think they are now a chain, but we went to a Dishoom in London. It was very good. I also tried this Turkish restaurant in London that was everything we ate there was amazing. I have to give some credit to Greggs, because the UK runs on Greggs, like the East Coast of America runs on Dunkin'. And Greggs at all hours of the day or night puts out of business. Like their trade is pretty impressive. But I finally tried a Greggs sausage roll, which is very, very English. And it was pretty good. I wouldn't say that I'm a sausage roll stan per se, but I enjoyed it. It was good. But honestly, probably will. So we were in the UK visiting my partner's family, and his mom made, I think it was a coconut cheesecake. It was very, very, very good. British women bake in a very serious way, and her cheesecake was fantastic. So probably that. Yeah. It had like chocolate on the top. I did try Christmas pudding. It's that, oh my God. Okay. So I'm not sure if this is true of every English household, but this English household, Will's family makes Christmas puddings, and they make it like well in advance. And it's like a pudding that's filled with dried fruits, and it kind of takes on a like texture of like kind of a bunched out, like a rum cake kind of. It's really dense with dried fruit, and you continually feed it booze, and then you light it on fire at Christmas. It was not for me, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I felt like that was a win, because the whole concept of it kind of grossed me out, but it was pretty good. I wouldn't plan on eating it again unless it was like at my family's house. But other than that, yeah, it was all right. But the UK likes a lot of food that I'm not the biggest fan of. So I tried to stay in my lane. Like I don't need to have black pudding. I can pass on that. I don't need to have, like, they also really like mayonnaise. Well, all of Europe does, I would say, to be fair. I'm not
Their
the biggest
mayonnaise
fan
is
of
better though.
Yeah, but it's still not for me. So
yeah.
But it was a really good trip. London's just insanely foodie. So we were kind of trying all sorts of stuff when we were down there. And then like when we were with Will's family, very good cooks. So I was a little bit spoiled. Sad to be back, but that's okay. So yeah.
Nice.
What about you and Kayla? Are either of you planning on going anywhere anytime soon? I feel like Kayla was kind of on her US tour of places that were kind of spooky. I know she did New Orleans, I think this last year. Kayla, are you planning on going anywhere anytime soon?
Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, right.
With our friend
right.
Annalisa.
Yes, I forgot.
In April. And yes, it's spooky as hell. And that's why I want to go.
It's actually the most haunted city
like
in the US.
A lot like New Orleans.
Yes, it's the most haunted city in the US. Yes.
I've only been to Charleston. I haven't been to Savannah.
God, I'm stoked.
I love Savannah. I have all the good things to say about Savannah. If anyone listens to this and you have takes on Savannah, just know that there's nowhere else in the world where you can get $2 rooftop rosé all day, every day, any day. And for that and every other thing about Savannah, it's a 10 out of 10 in my book.
Nice. So do we want to take a deep dive into all the things we discussed this year?
Oh my God. We can try.
No, I picked some things out for you guys that I thought would be good to touch on, and as kind of like a closing of 2024, going back, reviewing some things, touching on some things that we either discussed, as well as just like seeing how we still feel about a few things.
If we're jumping into this, though, we should really talk about what we're drinking, because
sure.
In terms of remembering all of the shit we talked about on here, and seeing if our takes hold up to our feet to the fire. Kayla, what are you drinking tonight?
Yeah, it should be taken into consideration that we're usually drinking on this podcast. So, yeah, it's a twisted tea.
Oh,
Yeah,
love that.
that's good. Don't have my usual truly strawberry lemonade, unfortunately, but it's fine. What
Okay.
about you?
Well, first of all, twisted tea is a great shout, but what would you rate it in comparison to your normal Truly?
Like a 3.
Okay.
It's fine.
3 out of 5.
I'm a woman who likes what she likes.
Yes. Yes. That is very true for you.
It's a little sweet. I'm scared of a hangover when I drink things that are too sweet.
Fair.
So there's that added anxiety in every sip. That takes it down at one point.
That's fair.
It would
That's
have
fair.
otherwise been a 4. What do you got going on?
I am drinking a Pinot Gris. Actually, no, it's not a Pinot Gris. It's a Sauvignon Blanc. I was going to get the Pinot Gris. It's a Sauvignon Blanc from King Estate, which Kayla is outside of Eugene. I felt like since we were going to be jumping on the podcast to do kind of a throwback to a place that I would frequent back when we were in law school. And I'd give it a 5 out of 5. It's kind of a household wine in this house. Anything from them is pretty good. So yeah, getting into some wine tonight. Stepping away from whiskey for a little bit. Usually I'm a red girl, but a good white is nice. So there you have it.
I'm drinking a classic beer, and I'll explain first why I'm drinking it. So I'm drinking what is called an Old Style. It's a beer from Chicago. My girl is
I
a
love
hottie
that.
from Chicago, and
Ooh,
it's like my favorite city in the whole world. That's why I'm
Me
wearing a
too.
Chicago Bears-ish hat right now.
I like that for you. And I love great shout on a Chicago just as a city. What would you rate it? What would you rate your drink?
My drink, Old Style.
Mhm.
I mean, it's an 11, baby. Like it's classic lager. It's like the Busch Light of
It's
Chicago.
like the Midwest PBR is what it
Yeah,
is.
dude. Yeah, it's amazing.
I love that for you.
Cool. Okay. Well, just to let everybody in on what we're doing, a few weeks ago, I proposed the idea that we do a recap of this year, go back and listen to some bits and pieces from some episodes, which I'll put in at a later time. I did pull those episodes, and I've been going through and listening to all the things that we've accomplished this year, which has been a lot of fun because it's like kind of traveling back in time and listening to like your guys' perspectives and the different places you guys have been in the last year. I wanted to start out. There was in episode, let me pull up my list here, episode 10. Kayla, you mentioned that at the time we were talking about New Year's resolutions and what you wanted out of 2024. And if anyone's listened to this podcast, one consistent thing that keeps coming up is the workload that a criminal defense attorney has. And the statement that you made goes as this.
Anyway,
What's up, guys? The new year,
Yeah.
new us.
New year, new us. Same shit.
Maybe.
One weekend, how do we feel about 2024?
Oh man, I
You
feel
know.
like
I mean,
2024. Kayla, what's your take?
I'm trying to be more reflective. My lesson from this past week is loosen your grip. You can't survive like this. You have to just like loosen your, like you have to let go of the things you cannot control. Like you were
Yeah.
saying, Addie. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of that in this job.
How are you feeling?
I also walked.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I walked 30 miles this week
Oh.
with my dogs.
Holy shit.
Oh, I was gonna. That's crazy. I thought you were gonna say just like at work. I was like, are you strutting up and down courthouses? Like, what are you doing?
No, just walking to the river, walking trails.
Trying to
Brings me
take
a
care of
lot
your
of joy.
headspace a little bit. Yeah, that's good. It makes me happy to hear.
Absolutely.
How are you feeling? How are you feeling about like the work year ahead? What's coming for your private practice? What are you excited about?
Well,
I hope that I can, you know what? I shouldn't say that. I will learn how to like manage my shit better. Like, what's tough managing your own practice is like doing all of the administrative stuff and also like doing
Being
the
an
work.
attorney.
You know what I mean? Yeah, like making sure all of your shit is like calendared and downloaded and filed. It's like it's annoying and it takes more time than you think it would. And I just my little ADHD brain just like tries to put stuff off, and then that's just like makes my life so much harder. So I just like, Kayla, do a little bit every day and you won't end up having to suffer for, you know what I mean? Hours.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just a learning process. But I'm super happy. Like being home with my dog all the time is like living my dream. Like it's all I've ever wanted.
So like you say that you're just doing a little bit every day, and it was like a positive thing that you were just like, look, if I can just do a little bit every day, that's like a good thing. Would you say that that is something that you've been able to carry out this year, or is that still with the workload that you have, like an evolving thing? Like what's that look like for you?
Well, I think I've stuck to that. If I think about every case that I have and every single thing that I have to do, I will just go catatonic. And so something I tell myself all the time is like, don't let what you can't do stop you from doing what you can. And like, if it's worth doing poorly, you know, like just do it. And I as far as like writing motions and stuff, and Addie kind of might know what I mean here, but yeah, I think that I've stuck to that. It's been great being able to work for myself. And this next year, I'm going to cut my public defense contract in half and hopefully just have more private clients and, less work, more money. It's always the goal.
Yeah. And would you say that like since making that switch, like are you splitting between private and public? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I'm doing right now. Yeah. And I want to transition to have it like more private.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for your answer.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining the show. So glad you're here. This isn't weird at all.
I love this. I thought this was such a good idea. And I'm so glad that it's like you getting to be more of like leading us, because I feel like sometimes you're just in the chaos
in the shadows.
We're rambling. Yes.
Yeah.
No, this is good.
Okay. So episode 11, Kayla wasn't able to make it. We had Justin Ackerman on. And that is one thing that I would like to circle back to later, is the guest that we had on this year. And so the first guest that we had was in episode 11, and that was an amazing conversation. Let's listen to this clip.
Your point about what treatment and sobriety looks like for every person isn't so simple. And I think that is like the future, I hope, of the criminal legal system. Like when we talk about the things that we can do and the needle we want to move, like I don't know if drugs, alcohol, anything will ever be viewed in like the person by person context that I wish it would be. But that's something I try to like have in my own practice, is like what this person's story is like, and like taking that away from the general like stigma around any of those things. And I think that to an extent, we've culturally thought that like treatment is the option and the alternative against, incarceration. But it's really important to recognize that both of those things also have this really complicated hand-in-hand relationship in the current push that we've had within the criminal legal system. And I don't know if you feel that way, Justin, but it's just like, I feel like we've kind of culturally came to a point where it's like, okay, let's not incarcerate people, let's get them treatment. But the way that is structurally organized kind of has them as like playing off of each other, and they're extremely interwoven. And it's like, okay,
for sure.
I don't think that we've found the right solution yet.
No, for sure. And I think I think that's the thing, is like, that's my biggest problem, is like treatment courts kind of hold themselves out as something different, but because they're so interwoven, with jail and these traditional options and probation, I don't think it ends up being that different. Then the context of kind of like treatment in most criminal cases is kind of done coerced, frankly.
Yeah.
It's done at the behest of the judge. It's done because you're going to go to jail if you don't. You're going to get a probation violation and have to deal with that. And like that's a real motivating factor for people. But I think a better system would kind of incentivize creating like pathways to recovery, like that you engage with before you're involved with the criminal legal system. And it's like, because I think I think almost everybody who is in a treatment court program or has reached that point where their substance abuse problem is getting them engage with the criminal legal system. Like, I think almost all of those people like recognize that they have a problem on some level, or like that this is negatively influencing their life and there are changes they could make to prevent that from happening. And I like, frankly, do not really care if people choose to use drugs or use alcohol to excess. Like, I think you shouldn't drink and drive because it's dangerous, but like, otherwise, like, I don't have like a moral problem with it. And I never really encourage my clients to like get sober. I'm not like, if you don't get sober, you're going to keep getting charges or whatever. I just am like, you will come to that when you come to that. And I will be here to provide resources if you approach me for it. But otherwise, like, you are going to make the choices you're going to make. And I think most people, like, it's just, we're not really like, I think for a lot of like a lot of the institutional pressure to get people into treatment comes at the behest of probation, comes with jail hanging over your head, comes because you're going to go to prison. And I don't think that that's like an accident. And I think it's part of like the inertia of the system we have, because it is the avenue by which most people who like reach that point in their lives, like engage with those systems. Not most people, but like a significant chunk. And I think that's a big part of like trying to imagine something different that like makes those interventions on the front end. And if you think about all the time, money, energy, resources spent like policing those things, if it was like spent like connecting people to treatment, like, and making that accessible, like funding it, like whatever it may be on the front end, I think you would have less DUIs, less people like addicted to drugs in a way it's becoming a problem for the community, and like all of the things that ostensibly treatment courts and the broader like carceral system are trying to fix.
I remember when this idea, the stigma around DUI court came up, that was new to me. Is that something that you guys, as we like continue on and like, for example, people decriminalize marijuana, hopefully, or states like get away from demonizing, criminalizing, things like that, that we could ever get away from stigmatizing DUIs? I
have so many thoughts about just, I think that's a really interesting question. I think that the US, I'm going to kind of answer your question kind of big picture and then also specifically to DUIs. I think something that's really difficult as a defense attorney is realizing that I think most substances in the US are going to have a stigma around them. Even alcohol, as it's legalized, it's extremely controlled in terms of, laws around drinking ages, laws around, all sorts of things, alcohol related. The US has a very interesting history with alcohol as well, in terms of, at one point the prohibition was a thing. So I don't know culturally how the US is always going to perceive alcohol. As a pretty religious country, I think that there's something to kind of consider with that as well. But with DUI specifically, I think in the current context, I don't know if society will ever get away from kind of villainizing people who have a DUI in their history for a few reasons. One, I think it's viewed as the person made a really poor choice, drinking and then driving. And I think, as I mentioned on that podcast, I think there's some socioeconomic considerations that I don't think get a lot of attention in terms of people having alternatives to drinking and driving. The counter argument to that is always going to be, well, then don't drink if you need to drive somewhere. But I think that's pretty diminishing as well in terms of some of the other things that our society also values in terms of going out and socializing. We have a culture where I think young people are kind of forced into social engagements where frequently alcohol is involved. So in terms of societal values, I think there's a lot of things that people would have to square in order to get to a place where they view DUIs differently. That being said, I think in the legal context, people view it as endangering others, so to speak. I think, we have a culture where driving is very common. Most people have to drive. And a lot of people are injured in car accidents all the time. So I think people get really hypersensitive about the idea of like drunk drivers hitting people. And that happens. So I don't know where we're going to go with the conversation about DUIs. I think statutes are also further incentivizing people to not really move on from somebody having a first offense DUI. And I'm going to give you an example. So in Idaho, if somebody gets a withheld judgment on their first offense DUI, so like maybe they have no criminal history, they make a bad mistake, they drink and drive, they get a withheld judgment on the first DUI. That's their first offense. Technically, a withheld judgment works for somebody to get that case dismissed on the back end. But with the way the DUI statutes are written in Idaho, that first offense DUI, if they got a withheld judgment on it, that still counts for purposes of future tallying for subsequent and enhanced penalties for additional DUIs. And that's a really long-winded way of saying that it really doesn't count as a dismissal in the same way that other charges do. So I view that as the legislature making a specific cutout for DUIs, and that they view that as a very separate and more dangerous offense than some other crimes. And so to answer your question, I hope so. I hope we get to a place where we can realize like people drink and drive, and not everybody makes the same mistake twice,
Sure.
So to speak. If they do, maybe that's a different thing, but not everybody does. And I think the fear is, that people will continue to get future DUIs, and that does happen. So there you go.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, Kayla, putting you back in the hot seat. Collectively, you guys were guests on other shows, and you were a rock star this year and went on 3 shows. Both of you were on the Prosecutors podcast. And Kayla, you went on to Street Talk and other stuff with Mike, I'm blanking on his last name, as well as Ian Bick's podcast, Locked In with Ian Bick. And funny enough, like you talked about DUIs on Ian Bick's podcast. For you, Kayla, out of all 3 podcasts, were there any standout moments that you're just like, man, that was a cool moment?
It was really cool just like getting to meet Ian Bick, honestly. And that's also where I met Lewis, who we had on our show. And yeah, you guys know he has a super cool story. So yeah, it was just really neat to meet really interesting people who have had really like dynamic life experiences and used it to create kind of this new platform where people who have been incarcerated or suffered from addiction are like getting to, create content for people to consume and to learn more about the system from like a very personalized perspective. And I think that's really important. And I think that's part of what we want to do in our podcast, because it's so easy to, I don't know, just kind of like have cognitive dissonance, I guess, as far as like mass incarceration and how broken our system is. And like to really get a glimpse, like, through the perspective of people who have been through it and are in the trenches, I think is really important.
Would you keep going on other podcasts and shows if you could in 2025?
For sure. Yeah. Love meeting interesting people. I think Addie and I both just really appreciate people's stories and experiences. And I think we both appreciate that everybody has something that they can teach us.
Oh, for sure. And the opportunity to just learn in that way was super invaluable, I would say.
Yeah. And I listened to all of them, and listening to the Prosecutors podcast was like such an interesting dynamic for you guys to be on there discussing your points of view. And I felt like that conversation was handled so well on both ends.
I agree.
If you guys are looking for that, you can go to the Prosecutors podcast and search through their episodes and find Drinks with Defenders on there. On that note, let's listen to some clips of the shows you guys went on.
Made you decide to get into criminal defense work? Okay.
It's gritty.
Yeah, yes, it is.
I
Okay.
like that.
Now, you know I'm an ex-cop, right?
I do.
So you know that. Okay. all
I
right,
do.
So that's good.
Listen,
Cool.
two sides of the same coin.
We work together.
That's right. That's how justice works. You need good players on both sides.
Yeah.
You know, I think in my listening of the Prosecutors podcast, I really appreciate the fact that the two of you are such good friends, or so it seems on your podcast, as colleagues on the other side of.
Sorry, I love the "so it seems." That is such a lawyerly thing to say.
Or so it seems.
Right.
I never want to say. I never want to speak
I've
for you guys.
never. Brett is always on thin ice over here. I think everybody knows that.
And how many people that you get as clients do you believe are genuinely bad people, if there are any? Like, how many people are actually the people that made just a one-time mistake, or are just evil, not good people that will continue to do this if they get a second chance?
I mean, I've had hundreds of clients. I've never thought that anybody was evil. I mean, most people are really cool and really normal. And, some people are kind of dicks, but you're going through it, right? Like, it's probably one of the worst things that you're ever going to experience. And I certainly can, be a bee, like if I'm just having a bad day. So like going through like your own personal tragedy, I can appreciate why they would feel that way. But most people are really cool.
Okay, so last question regarding going on other shows, Kayla.
That was wild. Being on TV is weird.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, how did you have any? Like, I was rewatching that recently, and is he like? Do you guys hold like opposing views on things? Because that's what I picked up on.
So, I mean, he used to be a cop, so
Okay.
Perhaps, in the way we're always a little bit against cops, I suppose, as criminal defense attorneys. Sure.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you for coming on my show, guys. Thank you again. Okay, so, all right. Okay. So we have a little bit of a theme for these next couple of questions, and this is going to be for Addie. This question in episode 13.
What about you?
Yeah.
What's up with you?
Let's see. My ADHD fixation is now like focused on Shark Tank again. Yeah, I just go through periods of being obsessed with stuff. I was in a Shark Tank era for like a month, and I kind of like moved on. I was just playing a lot of Baldur's Gate, but now I'm back in that Shark Tank life. Yeah. What am I going to say? Mr. Wonderful, what has he taught me? 97% of wine in America is sold for less than $12 a bottle. And Costco is the largest distributor of wine in America.
Let me tell you, I don't think I've ever watched an episode of Shark Tank in my life, but America runs on Costco, and most of America runs on wine. So that is something that makes sense to me. And I do buy wine at Costco. So I love that.
You've never watched Shark Tank?
I think I've watched like bits and pieces of it, but I would say ADHD goes kind of the opposite end, where yes, I hyper focus on like one show or hyper fixate on a single show or something like that, but it's never been Shark Tank. And that type of watching entrepreneurs pitch their ideas gives me like vicarious social anxiety, where I would just be so mortified if it was me having to pitch something, even if I thought it was a good idea. So that inherently the concept of Shark Tank makes me very uncomfortable.
I mean, it's capitalist propaganda. Listen.
That's true.
Did you ever watch Shark Tank?
Okay. I will say that since then, no, I have not gone back to Shark Tank. I've seen like clips of it. I think I've been in like the dentist waiting room or something at some point, and it was on TV. So I like kind of know what's going on. I'm sorry. I'm just saying I haven't really like actively pursued watching Shark Tank, but I know what it is. I've seen it. I wouldn't say I've ever really watched it.
Sure. Now, second question.
I mean, listen, it's capitalist propaganda. Okay. I'm under no dissolution of that. I appreciate that you saw some while you were waiting for the dentist. And Fair enough. When there are things like 14 seasons of Beverly Hills Housewives to watch, like
Exactly.
we only have so much time.
Exactly.
Got to live your life.
Exactly.
Speaking of sharks, Kayla,
Mhm.
you went swimming with sharks this year. If you could convince Addie and I to go swimming with sharks, like having spent some time around us over this show for the last couple of years, what would you think your in would be? Like, how would you convince us to go swimming with sharks?
She would just have
I
to
don't
ask
even
me.
think I would have to convince Addie. Literally.
Really?
I would go free will.
100%.
Man. All right.
You, Clark?
Yeah.
That's a little more tricky.
I'm the other kind of
That's
Aries.
a little more tricky.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Oh, man.
This year, we had on a lot of guests, starting with Justin Ackerman.
Hi, Clark.
Hey, Justin.
Our guest today is Louis Essig. Am I saying your name right, man?
You got it. You got it right the first time. It's rare.
Right on.
Today, we are going to be talking to the lovely Gabriella Moore.
Hi.
J.I. Stone.
Oh, I'm so pleased to be here.
Oh my God, look who's here.
Hey.
Well, before we even dive into it, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell our listeners where they can follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Moxie Rose. I call myself a spicy educator, usually because I'm educating on platforms that I can't usually say what I actually do, but I am a sex and kink educator.
This is the most that we've done in terms of guests. Were there any standout moments that you guys can think of off the top of your head in terms of the guests we had on?
Ooh, I have one. I really enjoyed talking with Moxie Rose. And I would say the standout moment to me was that we were talking about how her knowledge and her kind of experience could intersect with the criminal legal system. And for me, I always find, similarly to what you were talking about, kind of the respect for opposing counsel that I think we experienced when we were on the Prosecutors podcast. I really enjoy the moments of, synergy when things that people might not see the importance of how that interacts with criminal defense, and that being a learning experience both ways, where I can talk to somebody and their knowledge, I think, would help me be better at my job. But then in terms of me outlining how that would help me and then my perspective on it, people not really thinking that defense attorneys are the enemy. And I think in that conversation, we were having a conversation about, or we were talking about how, the argument of kink being a defense for people, and accused of, sexual misconduct of some degree. And I think in a point in talking, I think I realized that kind of understanding people's relationship with sex is going to be really important if you're ever working a sex case. But also for somebody who I think has, was speaking about the stigma that people who are interested in kink, that community experiences, realizing that people who are actually having to do kind of Kayla and my job aren't necessarily in the role of harming their community. I really appreciated that moment in our conversation. I thought just that episode was so different to kind of some of the things we normally talk about, and just plain fun. I thought she was just a really good time to have on the podcast. I enjoyed that a lot. So good shout out to Kayla for I think all of the guests we had on this year, it was Kayla's work. And to your point, Clark, we had more people on this year than before. And I hope that continues, because it just brings a different voice to our podcast and helps us learn about something while we're kind of talking.
Yeah. And Kayla, since you're the person who tends to find these people, if you could have a dream guest on in 2025, who would you want to chase after and get on our podcast?
Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
No
hesitation.
No,
there was no internet latency there. She just, fired that out. Okay. Gypsy
Dream
Rose.
guest.
Yeah. if you could just bullet point, like, why do you want to have her on?
Okay. Did you, I'm sure you haven't, but highly recommend Life After, is it Life After Lockup with Gypsy Rose Blanchard? She has like a reality show that followed her after getting out. And I just think she's a fascinating person. Just like her upbringing and going through the trial, going through getting convicted, having these relationships in prison and then having it not work out. And I just think all of it's fascinating.
You've been interested in her for years.
Aren't you? Did
yes,
you
but
watch,
not in the same way.
Actor? Okay.
Yeah, but not in the same way. That makes so much sense that would be your pick.
And I was...
Who's yours?
Oh, go ahead, Clark.
I was just going to say, I was watching the Kardashian show and then she appears on that show. And that was like a coincidence where I was like, holy shit, it's that person that Kayla's obsessed with. It's like, that's her. So.
Yes, it is.
Who would be a dream guest of yours, Addie, in 2025?
This is going to maybe be just such a, for lack of a better word, like vanilla pick. But I really think that for me, considering the year that occurred in 2024, it would never happen. But having the opportunity having the opportunity to talk to Kamala Harris, I think would be very interesting. Probably Kamala Harris. And there'd be other things to talk about, not just, her year in politics, but I just think that I would really appreciate more of an opportunity to understand her. Because for so long, I didn't feel like she was the right candidate for me for whatever reason. And I think my perspective on that changed a little bit for whatever reason. But I think that since the election, the Democratic Party has been a little bit quiet. And as somebody who professionally has to lose a lot as a defense attorney, talking to somebody about what it's like to lose at that magnitude when there's so much at stake and try to handle that as a woman, let alone a woman of color, with so much grace. I would really love to hear from her in that honest way. And I hope that, if it doesn't happen here, I would really like to find a podcast that does that. And I hope that ages well in terms of just her account in recent history, because I'm sure she has some really interesting things to say. And as another woman who, worked in the law, her climb career-wise, I think is very interesting. But yeah, more about anything, just about her experience, about how weird it is to run for presidency, how weird it is to run as the first woman of color in that way in the US, and then what it's like to lose at that magnitude. I think that would be something that would be kind of humbling to hear from. So her.
For sure. Yeah. Both great picks. And hopefully one day that will happen. Hopefully. Kamala, if you hear this, please.
Holler at your girl,
Gypsy, you hear this?
You're welcome at any time.
Open door. Well, as a wrap-up question, how do I want to say this? As a wrap-up question for 2024, if you guys could sum up your year in a word, what would be your word?
My word would be learning, having my own law firm and just learning what the hell I'm doing and, how to work smarter and keep my shit together. It's definitely been a year of learning. What about you, Addie?
For me, it's going to be challenging. Similar to your point, I feel like my career had to take a big pivot going into private practice. That wasn't necessarily a pivot that I saw coming at the time that it did, that I made that decision. And, taking on different cases, the learning aspect of being a lawyer is, I think, something that I hope continues through the rest of my career. Otherwise, I think I'm becoming a little bit complacent. But aside from just work stuff and the difficult decisions you sometimes have to make in terms of what you want out of your career and choices you need to make in a case, it's just been challenging. as an adult, I think you get older and your job becomes such a big part of your life. You're certainly, in my case, I feel like my friends live all over the country. So do a lot of my family members. And in terms of just trying to find the balance of it all, which is something that I continually talk about on here being a difficulty as somebody who chose this path, balancing it all, trusting myself to make decisions, giving myself the freedom to make those decisions, giving myself grace when things don't go necessarily how I want them to go, trying to be the version of myself as a lawyer and as a person and as a partner and as a friend and all of the different hats that I wear. I think it's been challenging. And certainly I think, Kayla, to, piggyback off of something you said about, your growth and your learning experience in private practice, those challenges sometimes have really good outcomes, but when you're in them, they're hard. And sometimes you meet a challenge to only be met with more afterwards. And so, I think 2024 has been a year of just challenges that I've had to figure out how to face and trust myself in facing them. And I think some of that hopefully gets easier in 2025 because, like Kayla said, hopefully you learn from some of it. But it's not been an easy year by any account of it, for sure. Yeah. Make it a good one. For me, it's the joy of things that have been put in action this year. I hope that the effect of them on the other side means that there's joyful moments to look forward to in 2025. Stuff with my relationship, stuff with seeing my friends, making plans to see my friends. The cases that I'm currently working on, hopefully most of those coming to resolution in 2025, trying to have outcomes on things that have been put into effect and trying to find the joy in that. I think when I look back on this past year, the things that I think were hard, the things on the flip side of that were really good about this year are the byproducts of my hard work and the moments that I got to spend with people that I love and care about. And so I'm looking forward to that in 2025. I'm looking forward to the joy of finally getting to this is what all that work was for, or, oh, this is the outcome of my marriage, or all of those things that is just going to be happy. And it's such a privilege to experience joy. And I don't think that joy is sometimes a natural thing. I think sometimes people have to work really hard to have certain happiness. And I feel like for me, that's been true, that the things that make me really happy are things that I've had to put so much into. And just looking forward to seeing that come to fruition, because that makes it all worth it. So, yeah.
That's beautiful, Addie.
Thanks.
And I really appreciated what you were saying earlier about learning how to trust yourself. That's such a big part of this job. And it's so hard when you have anxiety because there's so many things that you can second guess. Literally every single thing. It's tough. And so I think that's really amazing that you're recognizing that that's something that you need to work on and that you've worked really hard to get where you are and you're a good fucking lawyer and you deserve to trust yourself. And I trust you.
Yeah. And I think
would trust you with my legal case in a heartbeat.
And I would trust you with my life, right? That's why we have this space. But I think that in terms of the things where you're it is such a good feeling when you're finally oh, I used to freak out about this thing and now I'm just fucking doing it. That is such an amazing thing when that happens. And that's been really hard. And I think those moments are going to continue to be things that you experience as you become a lawyer. Like you and I have those things that are different things all the time. And so thank you for saying that. And thank you for commenting on just my take, because, you know, this podcast is joyful. Our friendship is so joyful. And I'm really grateful for that. So what about you? What are you looking forward to in the new year?
Well, I'm definitely going to try to trust myself more. I appreciate you articulating that again. I'm going to really try to keep that in mind. I'm looking forward to having less clients, being able to do a better job, and hopefully making more money. I also want to keep growing this podcast, right? Like, I really feel like the worst thing anybody can ever say is no, right? You told me that.
Yes,
and
I did.
Fucking love that. And that is really like, I think that's what's helped our podcast grow so much. It's like, whatever, let's just reach out to people. Let's just try it. The worst thing anybody can say is no, or just not listen, right? And so I just love that we're being vulnerable. We're doing the damn thing. And I hope that we can like continue to get new listeners and have interesting conversations with people from all across the criminal legal system.
And you know what? I want to give my dad a huge shout out on that, because I feel like I'm so grateful that you kind of reminded me of that, because if there's something that I wish our listeners could really get, that it's going to sound silly, but just whatever life looks like for people who share this space with us in 2025, the best piece of advice that I have ever been given in my life was from my dad. And I don't think I appreciated it at the time, but he told me that the worst thing that could ever happen is somebody tells me no, and that's a hell of a lot better than telling myself no. And for me, you know, that advice is something I've shared with Kayla, and I appreciate that you've taken from it what it has helped me with. But for me, it has like a practical effect every single day in my job. It's like, oh, I can ask a prosecutor if they're willing to do this. They might say no, and that's okay. And I've like wrapped my head around that's better than not asking. Like just being scared to do something and that fear holding me back from doing it is not, it's not an option for me anymore. It's like, okay, somebody can tell me no, but at the end of the day, me trying is so much better than me just like saying, no, that's not going to happen. And more often than not, as I think this podcast has shown, sometimes people say hell yeah when you ask them something. So more often than not, people don't say no as often as you might think they do. And I hope 2025 is full of both of us, and well, I should say all three of us. Clark, I'm going to loop you into this soliloquy as well. Going after things, because I think that's really what the new year is about. It's about recharging and taking what you've learned from the last year and building upon that. And opportunities, I think, come from putting yourself out there. So
for sure,
there you have it.
And on that note, I'm going to put it out there, because the thing that I want to happen in 2025 for the podcast is to meet you guys finally in person.
Yeah!
Because anyone who is listening to this, we've never met. Kayla and Addie have met. I've never met either of them. So,
which is super weird.
Yeah.
It's so crazy that like people that, well, that's the other thing that's so weird about the world too, is that like the opportunities to like meet people that your friends are friends with, it's so cool where that can take you. And I agree. I second that we definitely need to do something in the new year. It's overdue.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For sure. Well, cheers to finishing the year together. We did this for an entire year together. That's a big deal. And this is the second consecutive year that we've had the podcast. So here's to ending year 2 and starting year 3. I think it's going to be a great year on so many levels. And cheers to you guys and all the hard work that you guys are doing.
Cheers.
Oh yeah, cheers. Cheers to you too, Clark. You're freaking amazing. And Addie, you're amazing.
And cheers to all of our friends on the podcast.
Yes.
Okay, the end. Goodbye. Cheers.
Goodbye.